welcome to this week's episode of Grooves of Influence. My name's Xavier, your host, and this week I am joined by guest artist J.I. From Timeworm. J.I., do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, what's up? Name's Jay Gassen. Also go by Jack in the scene. Um, Lead singer and drummer of Timeworm. And yeah, happy to be here. And I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm super pumped to have you on. And um, every episode we start with the same question. What is the most influential album to you?
All right, so I actually brought all my copies of this. Um, so I got three copies of Revolver by the Beatles. I got it in mono CD,
Very
as
nice.
as they intended before they didn't believe in stereo until 68. So um that's as originally intended. The 2022 remix, which is pretty sick, and then my dad's old LP, um which is like OG stuff. So yeah,
Very cool. Well, you know
Revolver.
which one's my favorite out of those.
Yeah, you could see.
No, that's awesome. So, what was your first experience with that album?
um I mean, growing up, I listened to the Beatles a ton. My house was a neither of my parents were musicians, but had a really musical household, and especially early Beatles, my parents played a ton of in the car and just in the house growing up. So I heard a bunch of these tunes, just absorbed it via osmosis. Taxman, a favorite. Obviously, Yellow Submarine when you're like five is your favorite song. Um, Got to Get You Into My Life, Good Day Sunshine. I mean, list goes on. So original exposure was to all of it as a little tiny baby. But as I got into college, I decided to do a deep dive into the Beatles and all their deep cuts, and I did a run of their whole discography because I knew the hits, and I, you know, everyone knows the hits, obviously, and forever will. But I wanted to know like the nitty gritty. I wanted to go into the deep dive of them. And Revolver just it really strikes me as like there's nothing else that they made that sounds like this, let alone anything that anyone has made that sounds like this. Like it's their transition, sits between Rubber Soul and Sergeant Pepper. So it brings them from this early acoustic, more folk, like rock and roll, like boy band type era to this psychedelic, electric, um, progressive, experimental. And this is the album they stopped touring in 67. Um, and they decided to use the studio as a tool, and they weren't limited anymore by needing to play these songs live. So this is the first album where they're not hindered by playing for their screaming audiences around the world. They can just cook, sit in a room, make whatever they want to make. And this is when stereo started to be a thing and started to be a burgeoning technology. So, there's tape modification, there's cool stuff with the stereo effects, and then obviously it sets the ground for Sergeant Pepper, which is arguably more famous. Um, but I just think Revolver has like I can stop talking about this whenever you want.
No,
Okay.
no, keep going, man.
Um, but Revolver has this quality, like this tonal quality to it of it's like really raw. I mean, it's weird to say an album with Eleanor Rigby on it is raw, but the guitar tones they used, the just experimentation, the harmonies. I mean, they argued about whether they should put Eleanor Rigby on this album, if that was a Paul McCartney song or if that's a Beatles song. Um, and good thing they put it on this. But and this is one of the first albums that George Harrison really pops off too, like being one of the underrated songwriters of them. I mean, Taxman slaps. I Want to Tell You slaps. Um, so he's all over this, and obviously Tomorrow Never Knows. So it's just Like they're famous for their experimentation and they're famous for their boy band stuff. And Revolver is like the line between them. And nothing that they made sounds like this. And you can just kind of tell by holding it, and it just like has this quality of otherworldliness or something. And uh yeah, in the lineage of the Beatles, I think it's in a really interesting spot. I mean, I almost picked Abbey Road. Abbey Road's one of the best albums ever, 69, what a crazy year for music. Um, but Revolver just has this like raw, experimental like thing they hadn't honed in yet, but you could tell they were open to it. And the Indian influences as well from George and all his trips to India started to filter in. You have Love You Too is their first Indian song, like in that style with the sitar. So
Right. That was definitely surprising. I mean,
yeah,
listening to it as you're kind of progressing through I mean, knowing more of the popular stuff from the Beatles. I mean, if you hear something like that, you'd be like, that's the Beatles. And I think this album, there's a lot of that, I think, just with what they were doing. And I mean, it's very diverse. It's a very diverse album. I don't feel like it's like super cohesive, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
yeah,
I don't think that that's really what they were as much trying to do, but there was some similarities. And like you said, you kind of saw these early roots of what would become more experimental, even playing with, different sounds that aren't music, right?
yeah,
Aren't instruments. They started playing around with different like, in, I thought, Yellow Submarine, I was like, they literally incorporated a band playing a song within a song. When you
yeah,
think about that, you're like,
yeah,
that's actually kind of crazy.
yeah.
Like for them to do that, I mean, in the 60s, like that's just super unheard of. And it shows like where they were really going, like you said, that shift for them. And so I know you've hit on this a few times talking about like there's something about this album that's really hasn't been duplicated. And how would you really try to define that in a sense? Like what about it makes it that way for you when you listen to it?
I mean, I say one aspect of it that you touched on about the all the places that the album is pulled to, from the lush harmonies of Here, There, Everywhere to the raw, biting Taxman, to the weird sounds in Yellow Submarine and Tomorrow Never Knows. Got to Get You Into My Life with the horn sections, actually inspired the band Chicago to like be created.
Dude, I heard that song and I said, this is Chicago. Like, this
Chicago
is
heard this
Chicago.
song and they became Chicago.
That is
That's
so
what,
crazy.
and it's about weed, which is kind of funny. Like McCartney trying weed for the first time. And Eleanor Rigby with the strings. Paul's the only Beatle on that one. Like, I think that's one thing is it's cohesive in its uncohesiveness in a way. Um, and I just think another thing is the experimentation. Like, they're informed by their early songwriting and the early, they wrote a million pop hits, and they bring that sentiment and approach to, hey, what if we had a 20-piece brass section? Hey, what if we had a 10-piece orchestra? Hey, what if this part was in reverse? We loop this, we reverse a laugh, we, while they imbibe it with their classic Beatles stuff. Hey, what if George hops on the sitar and writes about, you know, just like poking at ideas that are psychedelic and nothing that their audience expected from them. So I don't quite know what makes it so special, but they obviously had something. The Beatles could have gone a different direction. They could have stopped at Rubber Soul, made a million Rubber Souls and Helps and Hard Day's Nights, and they made Revolver next for whatever reason, um, with their chops and their approach. So I don't know, man.
No, I mean, I think sometimes defining something like that's difficult as much as it's just a feeling. In your own music, in your own creation, do you try to replicate that idea of experimentation and kind of going places that maybe are a little unconventional, or kind of what's your approach when you're like putting together an album?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm really inspired by the way that the Beatles and so many other artists before and after them decided to use the studio as an instrument and mess with the ways you can bend vocal tones and reverse instruments and bring in non-musical sounds, like you said. The song within a song thing is crazy, but yeah, I have done a lot of experimentation that I think is just fun. I think, especially with Timeworm, like we can bring the four-piece locked in jam. Everything is syncopated. The parts are thoughtfully intertwining. And we're grooving on stage, having a good time, looking at each other, like, and you can go home and listen to the studio version where we do more, where the guitar goes from here to here, and this sound pans across, and these songs blend together, and there's this weird droopy vocal because I slowed the recording down and then sped it back up. Um, I just think there's so much fun in that. Like, beyond anything more heady than that, just it's a fun time to be like, oh, this song, like one of our tunes on our upcoming album, Always Mind, is like, you know, it's kind of sounds like it could put you to sleep in a good way. It's like I want you to sit in this mellow groove, and a lot of our stuff isn't like that. And so in the chorus, it's like, what's the kind of droopy sound we could do with the vocals? So I pitched my vocals way down, and so it doesn't come out all bright. It like sits in this kind of sleepy space. So I'm always trying to do something with that. And my bandmate let me produce that way. And they're just like, yeah, sounds good. So I'm grateful for that.
That's awesome. And so when you're making these decisions, is it really just like, I'm gonna try this, see what happens, I'm gonna try this, see what happens? Or do you kind of go into it with kind of a thought process of like, I can kind of see the picture I'm trying to paint with this song. How am I gonna get there? Or is it like I'm gonna kind of transform it as I go?
Uh, it's a little bit of both, and probably song by song it changes. But most of my approach is let's try this and see what happens. Even with deciding on what the guitar part is, how the bass locks in with that, how the snare and the kick link, like, let's try it and see what happens. If it's a bad idea, if my guitarist, Indy, has a better idea about what the drum beat should be, and I have a different one, let's try both. Which one's the best? Like, let's step back from our egos. Which one's better? Boom, let's pick that. Like, I think the studio is like that too. Just sitting at the desk, mixing, what if this did that? And I have some of I'm not like, I still have a lot left to learn, and I'm always learning while I'm doing it. And I think that's part of it too, is just, can I do this? What if this happened? And some of those things I am inspired by weird psychedelic things that the Beatles did, the Beach Boys did, other electronic artists did, hip hop artists did. Like everyone is kind of tapping into this same soup of everything. So I don't think I'm doing anything outside the realm of possibility, but it is very much just what is possible and what if we did this? And if it sounds like garbage, Command Z, you know, in a second. Like
Right?
it's always possible.
It's a little easier today than it was then. You know,
Yeah,
we aren't having to redo the tapes or
yeah, yeah,
re-record it all. We can just
exactly.
cut little parts out.
Yeah, it's a blessing.
Yeah, it definitely has changed the way music's created. Have you ever thought about going analog? Have you ever like wanted to explore that route in making music, or are you mainly digital?
I'm mainly digital just based on cost and setup, and I've always had a laptop and a Scarlett interface, and that's all you need. The analog thing is cool. This is guy Isaac who is in a band called Mama Llama, and he'll like splice tape together, but you have to like line it up exactly, and it's just a different level of the process that brings a sound to it that's cool. Hasn't been my wheelhouse. Definitely the digital. I was a computer kid. I'm a computer guy. I built this computer. This has lasted 10 years that I'm using right now. Um, and so I just have that digital approach. And I know I lose some of that analog sound, but I try to bring some of the rawness on the front end of, letting mistakes stay in the recordings and letting the free experimentation happen through that process. I don't want it to be quantized and super cut and dry. Like we don't record to a click, like we record to each other and all the ebbs and flows of that because you feel our energy in that space in a live take. So, uh, augmented by the digital process.
No, that's super cool. So when you guys are recording in this upcoming album, did you guys record a lot of it like individual tracks, or did you guys record the tracks together, like playing like live for the most part?
We did the rhythm takes, so drum, rhythm, guitar, and bass all together in a room. Put DI'd the bass and then put the guitar amp out in another room. So there's no bleed. And then on top of that, tracking the vocals, tracking the guitar solo. Um, so you get that live feel. The root, bones of the song are us in a room playing it and responding to each other, looking each other in the eyes, like doing that song and dance. Because I think that is what makes Timeworm fun to watch and something we bring to the scene is our live improv, the way we play off each other. And so I wanted to be intentional about capturing that in the recording process.
That's awesome. And just shifting the conversation a little bit, going back to the Revolver, I noticed like every single song there was a crazy shift, whether it was a key change or a complete different rhythm going on. It was organic, but it still created like just made the song interesting. And I noticed in your music, you do a lot of similar things.
Yeah. Yeah,
You're
that's no
constantly,
accident.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're constantly shifting. So I was curious if you'd speak on a little bit about that influence. Like, do you find this directly from the Beatles, or is there other influence that you find that you kind of pull from when creating these shifts in your own music?
There's a lot of which hip hop is probably influenced. I mean, everything is influenced by everything, but there's a lot of, beat switches in hip hop or experimentation that way. And other bands have done it in subtle ways that I really like Crumb or Real Estate or Fountains of Wayne or insert a million bands. But the Beatles really distilled that in a way of like helped pioneer it for broad audiences. And I think it's just fun to be like, what if you think the song is over, like Ponderosa, you think the song is over and it's actually not? Like, how can we play with the listener's expectation? How can we blend this in a way that's interesting? Like Before I Die, um, that song, what if this part goes to three instead of four? Like just on a whim. And how could I play my drum fill into that to make it fall into three in a natural way? Um, and sometimes it's like, what if we abruptly, whatever. And some songs don't call for that. Some songs, you don't need three different, like crazy stuff going on. It's just it keeps people on their toes. It keeps it interesting. It's fun to play. It's fun to be like, you thought the song was over. It's actually not. We get a lot of that at shows in front of people that like we played at Tree Fort Music Fest in Boise and we played Don't Be and there's a bunch of like da na 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 da na na the like long pause and people are like they start to clap and then we go back into it. I just love that like playing with people in that way. So it's just fun.
So it seems like when you're making your music, you're very mindful of the audience.
Yeah. I'd say yes and no. I think that's a slippery slope, because you don't want to curate something based on what you think other people will think is cool, you'll think is good. Um, Obviously, we know people will listen to it, but also will listen to it, and we're playing it, and we're living in this composition for 4 minutes or whatever. So, um, I think for anyone who's making anything, who's drawing, painting, sculpting, making movies, like if there's an audience of one of you, or like you and your girlfriend or your friend or your mom who likes it, that's one, two people who thinks it's cool. There's going to be more people that think it's cool. Like now it's possible to be cool because you have an audience of at least one that you're making it for. And I think that's more important than making it for what you think people will like. I feel like that never goes well. That stuff isn't timeless. That stuff doesn't like scream genuine. What screams genuine is like the band thought this was sick. And they hope you do too. Like I try to have that approach.
Do you think you kind of always had that approach when it comes to making music, or is it something you had to learn?
I think I had to learn it for sure, but my road to recording and releasing music was I recorded my first album when I was 18 in my parents' house, and I would do it when they weren't there. And they didn't even know I was recording an album. It was a 14 song thing until it came out. And I put it under a fake name, so I didn't tell them, didn't tell anyone. And eventually, I don't remember how people found out about it, but um, I just having the pressure off of like, no one will listen to this besides me. Like maybe one or four people will listen to this made it so if I thought it was cool, it was cool. Um, so I think I didn't put words to that until later, but I liked starting without the pressure of having people listening. And now I've gotten to a point where I'm more like proficient in mixing and songwriting and jamming and Timeworm is going to be probably the most listened to thing I've ever made. And I'm not saying a million people listen to it. I mean, we have 700 followers on Instagram. I've never had 700 followers on Instagram before that are like maybe going to listen to this thing. So there's some pressure that comes with that. And I'm actually learning to deal with that, which maybe people start in the reverse. Yeah.
How did you get into music? How did it all start for you? I know you said you released your first album at 18.
Yeah. Picked up the piano just by ear from my sibling playing it. Picked up the drums because my teacher was like, "You have good rhythm and you're drumming on your feet and hands and you should just pick up some sticks." And then when I was 16, I was like, vocals plus piano plus drums equals plus me alone and no one knows I'm doing this equals I can be a songwriter with no pressure and no eyes on me. So I was just drawn to, I'm a pretty inward person. I've become better at talking to people, and I really think people are interesting. But I have an inner like process, and I've always been an artist. Like when I was a kid, I would tape things together. It's kind of a meme in my family now. Me and tape, just like tape a Hot Wheel and a pencil together. Like boom, new invention. Let's like, where's the next one? Um, so I've always been creative like that, but I didn't step back and say, "Hey, wait, I'm an artist." And so I started making tunes because I just love music. And I was like, "Hey, this idea is cool." Or what if this chord came after this chord? And what if the vocals did this? And like my first album had this like 8-minute song with four parts, and it's like it does not sound good now, but you can hear me trying to. I don't know. I just like making stuff. I make up card games. I like writing. Um, I like building computers. I have a drive to do that, and I love music, and it just fit together.
Yeah, and you've mentioned playing drums a few times, and I know that's your primary instrument,
Hmm.
at least in Timeworm.
Yeah.
Um, how do you take that energy into the way you play the drums? Because I feel like drums are, and definitely like the way you play on the album, like I feel like you're really good at fitting in with everything else and the groove and stuff. It's not like you're trying to overpower. Like I was just listening to like Blink 182, right? And like
Uh,
it's it's a special type of drumming that, that's happening in that group. And it's like it leads the music versus, a lot of times drums are more, you know, I guess feeling the sound and connecting different parts. And so like when you're playing the drums, like how do you keep that creative energy and do what you do?
that's a good question. I think, I mean, drums are so expressive for me because it's my whole body. It's, I can decide, like, I'm always trying to learn new fills and have more chops and stuff, but the way that my right foot and my left hand and like, I just love matching that all together. And it feels really good. It feels really natural. Probably like someone who picks up a guitar and looks at the six strings. I see like, I don't know what I'm seeing, but they're seeing the way that those frets and strings connect, and feel that when they're in the middle of it. And I feel like drums places me literally surrounded by that symbols and things to hit and ways to do that. And mixing the singing in is really fun too because I can like separate my body and where that is and thinking of lyrics and it leads me to how do these lyrics fit rhythmically into this and how do they melodically fit with the guitar and the it's just this like feels really natural to have that be the next step for me. And Timeworm lets me do both at the same time, which is really fun. And I just love like locking with my basses, locking with the guitar, and he plays like a bow, 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 and I go like got I like listen and respond and it just in little ways that it's a little conversation we're having and I don't want to overpower. I just want to be one of a I want to make a collage of sound that feels good. And sometimes that means no drums and guitar is 100. Sometimes that means 100 drums and nothing else. Like it's composition by composition. And um, I'm just, I don't know, the drums just feel natural to me, like other things feel natural to other. There's some things that don't feel natural to me that I wish did, but the drums are just one of them for some reason. And they kind of picked me, and I'm glad to be playing them. It's fun as heck.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to see somebody sing and play the drums. It's always an intriguing thing
Yeah.
to me to see somebody do it because I'm always thinking like, does it help? Like, do you have like a better sense of like and a better feel of the song than maybe you were playing keyboard? I mean, I'm assuming you've played keyboard and sang at
Hmm.
the same time.
Yeah,
So,
a
like,
bunch.
what's the feel difference when you're doing that?
I mean, I think I gravitated towards the keys as well because that's a percussive instrument. I mean, on like a literal level with the hammers hitting the strings in a piano. But uh peop like my partner ran one time, she could only hear I had my headphones plugged into the keyboard, so she could just hear me playing the notes and she couldn't hear what was actually coming out. And she was like, "You play those like a drum set. You play those." I think I'm just rooted in syncopation and rhythm. So there is a there is like something similar about that, I think, in the way that I would write for piano, and I'm still writing stuff on the keys. And now I'm just bringing it, like I play all the keys on the record, but it's like, hey, what if we played this? Like Ponderosa, I watched a Hayao Miyazaki movie and wanted to write a Hayao Miyazaki piano thing. And then Indie took it, and when it became a guitar thing, it changed totally in this funky, upbeat, like now it's something else. And on the piano, it was an old thing, and now, but we're like vibing with this. So I don't know. That totally didn't answer your question, but um,
You're good.
the drums, like people are like, oh, that's got to be so. I don't know. It feels like I'm playing one instrument. Like I'm playing and then also stuff is coming out of my mouth. And my brain is involved, my body's involved, my mouth's involved. It's just like I'm having a full body experience that's just fun. So it helps in a way. Sometimes if I'll forget words if I need to practice lyrics if it's a new song and because I'm thinking about where do the drums line up and everything, which is probably easier if you're just singing to like spend more brain power on lyrics. But
I mean, when you're playing the drums like you do, are you like literally, um, like, I mean, you mentioned a little bit ago, kind of like doing that talking back and forth, like if you have the bass player play something. So you're like singing and then also thinking consciously of those. Yeah, that's crazy, man.
well, it's like, I mean, you practice anything enough. Um, when you write something down, you're not like, oh, the A looks like this and the F. You've done letters forever. Now you can think about what you're writing. It feels like that, where it's like I'm in a full body flow, because I've practiced drumming a ton, practiced drumming and singing more and more as I do it. So now while I'm doing it, I can look into the audience. I'm trying to do that recently of like, look people in the eyes, like, oh, is my friend over there? Oh, is my coworker over there? Um, or like it frees up practicing and flowing, frees up that like frontal lobe brain space for like, ooh, what if I did this? Like those thoughts are actively happening and there's room for them somehow. I don't know.
That's crazy, man.
I
I
don't
don't know
know.
either. That's awesome.
I just do
But
it. I don't know.
yeah, dude. Well, this has been awesome talking to you. I know you mentioned it a few times so far. You have an album coming out. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would love to. Um, it's called Interplanetary Flamingo Park Reunion, and it's out on May 20th. The band is Timeworm. Our debut album has no business being this weird and strange and eclectic, but we went for it. My bandmates said, hell yeah. And it's our debut project. And I mean, I've listened to it probably thousands of times at this point because producing it and everything. So I'm so thankful that it's going to be in everyone else's ears now and I can give it to people. And yeah, so super stoked.
Awesome, man. Well, I can't wait to listen to it too, more and more,
Yeah.
and share it with people. And so, guys, be sure to check it out. Um, and yeah, man, excited to see where you go. Do you have shows this upcoming year? Are you going to be playing anywhere so people can
Yeah.
come and
I
see you?
mean, that Saturday, May 24th, we're playing the album front to back at the Chameleon in Spokane. We got the strings on the record, we got the weird sounds on the record, we got a visual going. So, trying to put on a production for the album. And then we might try to tour it a little bit this summer, just do a weekend in Montana, a weekend on the coast. Um, just try to bring it to people because we've heard that when an album comes out, that's the beginning of its life. It feels like the end for us, but it's finally beginning for everyone else. So, yeah, we're playing a bunch. I mean, we play every month, once or twice. So, yeah,
Awesome.
Timeworm Band at Timeworm Band to follow us and keep up.
Yeah, go follow them. Well, thank you, man. It's been awesome. Been a pleasure talking to you. And
Yeah, you too.
yeah.